Right then, I wanted to talk to you. United are playing Leeds this weekend. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the rivalry. Why do United hate Leeds? Why do they hate us? Where's this rivalry come from? Is it as deep as it seems on the surface of things? Like they sing, we only hate Man United. We sing, we all hate Leeds scum. There is a genuine hatred amongst the two sets of supporters. But why is that? Well, let's have a look. So United and Leeds have an intense rivalry, and apparently that began as early as 1906. But I believe the roots are a lot further back than that in history. It goes back to the War of the Roses. Manchester has typically been one of the largest cities that represents Lancashire, Leeds obviously being one of the largest cities that represents Yorkshire. The House of Lancaster and the House of York basically created a bit of a bitterness between both of those two areas, either side of the Pennines, and that's truly not really fully disappeared, despite the fact that that war was 500 years or so ago. The fact one team plays in red and one team plays in white, sort of symbolising both of those two sort of rivalries, adds to that, I think. It's also the fact that United and Leeds, or Manchester and Leeds, have been rivals for business since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th century. And now it seems like with all of the investment from the government in the north, it's still these two cities that are sort of competing for a lot of the investment when it comes to both tech and business and that sort of stuff. But if we're talking purely about football, for me, this really comes from Busby and Don Revie. And it wasn't really until the Second World War that Manchester United became a fully fledged footballing power. That was obviously down to Matt Busby. They picked up 3 league titles in the 50s. We created a youth system that dominated the FA Youth Cup, the Busby Babes, our first ventures into European football. And Matt Busby was obviously the man at the helm driving all of that sort of glory. Right up until he finished with the club, initially in the 60s and then for good in the 70s. Meanwhile, across the Pennines and across the M62 in Leeds signed up former player Don Revie, and he was their player manager who soon took up a full-time managerial post. Manchester United of the time, that was the swinging 60s, the Charlton Law Best, the Trinity side. And at the time, Leeds was starting to become a little bit of a big deal. Their reputation being a tough, uncompromising, dirty side. Dirty Leeds was the name. They had Sir Bobby's brother, Jack Charlton, was a mainstay. Billy Bremner, Norman Hunter. Really tough, hardcore footballers. And another key member of Revie's great side was the Irishman Johnny Giles. He joined Leeds from Manchester United for a fee of £33,000 in 1963, which I think added a little bit of spice to that hostility. Bobby Charlton was a regular scourge of the Yorkshiremen, Leeds fans in particular, with the fact that his brother was the root of their team, hated him. He was the heart of the Leeds defence, and I think that added to the sense of drama and a sense of theatre around the occasions. It was probably one that stands out that the 64-65 season, the two sides are drawn against each other in a semi-final of the FA Cup for a chance to reach the title. The tie was at Hillsborough. It was a tough game, and there's an image of Jack Charlton and Dennis Law punching each other and wrestling each other to the ground, which I think epitomised the spiciness of that rivalry during the 60s. That game ended 0-0, with the Yorkshire Post commenting that both sides behaved like packs of dogs snapping and snarling at each other over a bone. And for me, from that moment, the rivalry's not really taken a backward step, even when Leeds were outside the top flight. Following the swinging 60s, hooliganism really sort of took root in the 70s, and I think that's where the two fan bases started to really get at each other. If you speak to United fans of a certain generation, Elland Road is the place that they hated going to the most. That was the place with the most trouble for United fans. Hostility was intensified on and off the pitch with that. Leeds United service crew, United's Red Army, two of the most notorious hooliganism gangs in British football. It was commonplace and known to be known as one of the most violent clashes in English football. Many people were injured in these encounters. The violence between the two fans didn't really decline at all, really, until the 80s, for a number of reasons. it was only since really the introduction of all-seater stadia and the Premier League and the changing attitudes of the police a little bit following the disaster at Hillsborough that it started to cease. But it's always remained, even if it's in smaller groups. As recently as 2010, prior to the two clubs meeting in the FA Cup third round, United manager Sir Alex Ferguson described the matches as fantastic, feisty occasions with electric atmosphere, tensions through transfers such as Eric Cantona, Rio Ferdinand, Alan Smith has not dampened it in the slightest whatsoever. The rivalry has been labelled by both the Telegraph and other newspapers as English football's most intense, if inexplicable, rivalry. Before Leeds' promotion to the Premier League, the two sides only really played each other twice since 2004, and they hadn't played each other at all in 9 years, with United getting much the better of the Yorkshire side since their return to the Premier League. The rivalry between Leeds and United, in my own opinion, I started watching football in 1990, and obviously it was United versus Leeds for the title in 1992. And United had a hell of a load of games called off, and it led to us playing basically a game every other day, the back end of April. And that was where United's season crumbled, and Leeds obviously pushed on and managed to win the title. The games between the clubs at that time were unbelievable affairs. Leeds coming out on top and winning the title as United crumbled. And that was the last time an English manager ever lifted a top flight trophy in England, 1992. Since then, obviously, Cantona joined United and United went from strength to strength. Leeds had a little bit of a flurry towards the back end of the 90s with David O'Leary before they went away and literally collapsed all the way down through the leagues due to poor financial management by Peter Ridsdale. The Leeds and United rivalry, I think there's roots in how close the cities are. United obviously have a great city rivalry with Manchester City, city-based rivalry with Manchester City. We have a city-to-city thing with Liverpool, and that's, again, a bit more industrial revolution, a lot to do with trade, and a lot to do with the proximity of both of those two cities. But Leeds is exactly the same on the other side. It's about as far away. Liverpool and Leeds, you've kind of got Manchester right in the middle of it. Leeds doesn't have an intercity rivalry with anybody. And Leeds it's a city on its own, surrounded by a lot of other cities. York is close by, but York's never been a big footballing side. You've got the teams in the northeast, but they care more about playing each other. You've never really had anything worthwhile going on with Bradford, who is the closest place to Leeds. So Leeds have always had to look to Manchester for the place that they could attach a rivalry to. And almost a little bit like Bolton, I feel like not quite as bad. Bolton hate United, and they're so irrelevant when it comes to Manchester United's rivalries. Leeds are on United's radar. I think to the modern fan, they're so far down behind the likes of Arsenal, behind the likes of Chelsea. I think to most Reds, there's probably 5 teams that we really hate. And I would argue Liverpool is number 1. Manchester City is number 2. For Reds of a certain age, I'd say anyone older than me, this might be different, but I think people my age and younger, you're looking at Chelsea and Arsenal because of the rivalries that we've seen during the Premier League era. But I think anyone that went in the 70s and 80s or even the 60s, Leeds probably goes right in there alongside the likes of Liverpool and City as some of our fiercest, most hated rivals. And do you know what? I see far too much friendly conversation and support across teams. Bring back hating your rivals. Bring back rivalries. Bring back having a go at other teams. Let's stop all this wishy-washy friendship bollocks. What makes football brilliant, what makes the atmosphere electric, is fucking hating and refusing to lose to them lot. And Leeds are right in that. Them lot. Dirty Leeds. That's my explanation of the rivalry. Older Reds, do you want to chime in and tell me what I've missed? Younger Reds, hopefully you kind of understand a little bit where this comes from. It's not necessarily something that we've seen 2000 onwards because Leeds was in the doldrums and we love that. But sometimes, a bit like when Rangers were in the lower divisions and Celtic, it became a little bit boring for them. I think you've got to have rivals to make football spicy and make football interesting. So I'm glad that they're back. but let's keep them where they belong, well below us. Hey, thank you for watching the video. If you are new around these parts, then don't forget to subscribe. My channel is proudly supported by my community on Patreon. If you'd like to get a little bit of extra content, a Discord group, meetups, five-a-side games, weekly podcasts, behind the scenes, and even an occasional bit of transfer news as and when I get it, then for the price of a pint, you can show your appreciation for the content that we make and get some goodies for doing so as well. Check the link in the description or click the button right here. You'll also find all of my socials here too if you want to follow me on any of those platforms. Nice one.